Thank you for those comments. We've also had a huge response from you to our exclusive report yesterday about care homes, which ban people from visiting elderly relatives when they raise concerns about their care. In some cases, residents have even been evicted rather than the complaints being addressed. Well, following our investigation, the Care Quality Commission, which inspects homes in England, has told us they know this is happening and that too many people are frightened to raise concerns. Well, our reporter Sangeeta Maiska, who brought this story to our attention, is here with us. Sangeeta, just remind us of the detail of what you found out.
So I began this investigation by working off tips that I'd got from lawyers and campaigners who want reform of the care industry, telling me that hundreds of people every year are banned from seeing their relatives in the care homes that they're living because those relatives had raised complaints about care. They also told me that the residents themselves had sometimes been evicted as a result of those complaints because it was simply easier to move them on than try and bring about change within the nursing or care homes. I spoke to several families who were really, really worried, Joanne, about telling us their stories. One of the people that agreed to come on to our programme to tell us what had happened to them was Paul Doolin. His 90-year-old father, who had problems hearing, was registered blind, had cancer and used a wheelchair, went into a nursing home when he was 90 years old in Somerset. Paul Doolin says that he was there for 3 years and would visit every single week. And every week he would raise complaints about things that he felt were impacting on his dad's care. He says that one day after 3 years, out of the blue, he got an email saying he was no longer welcome at the home and that the only place that he could meet his dad would be on neutral territory at a local restaurant, and that those visits would be chaperoned henceforth by a care worker employed by the local authority to watch them. This is what Paul Doolin told us.
I'd always had a good relationship with Dad, and it was completely unnecessary. Yeah, it was upsetting. It was deeply upsetting.
When you saw the email telling you that you were banned from the care home where your father was living full-time, what was your reaction?
Well, disbelief. As I say, I think I read it 3 or 4 times. I just couldn't believe what I was reading.
Now, we contacted the care home and put to them the allegations that Paul Doolin had made, that he had been banned simply for complaining. They came back to us and said that they had followed all of the current guidelines put out by the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, who is the government's regulator and inspectorate, and also the local authority. So we asked ourselves, why is this happening? And having talked to lawyers and campaigners, they all seem to feel that there is an imbalance of power in the contracts written by nursing homes. So nursing homes in England will write a contract and they will ask a resident to sign it, or they'll ask a local authority to sign it, and the terms and conditions on which the residents live in nursing care homes are set by that nursing home. And the allegation is that as a result there's an imbalance of power. Eileen Chubb, a campaigner in the industry, can tell us more.
The balance of power is totally weighed against the relative. Raising concerns and whatever the care home says is taken at face value by all of the authorities. So basically the resident and the relative are the people with the least power, and that is a major part of the problem.
Well, the Care Quality Commission has given us a statement. They've told us that family members should not live in fear of being penalised for raising concerns. I'll just read out the statement. They also add, we see plenty of excellent practice where managers and staff respond to complaints positively, but we know this is not everyone's experience, with reports of visiting restrictions and of people being forced to leave against their wishes. We also know that too many people are frightened to raise concerns because they think this is going to happen. We have published information to clarify people's rights and our expectations of providers so that people living in care homes, their families and friends can be more confident that their concerns will be listened to and acted upon. We would love to talk to the Care Quality Commission on our programme so that they can explain in more detail how they're planning to tackle this issue, but they have again declined to appear. It's an open invitation, though, if they do want to come on. But as we're hearing in that statement that they've put out, they're clearly acknowledging that this is a problem they've been aware of when they say they know people are afraid to raise concerns.
there are 4 really interesting things. I'll just run through them really quickly with you. When you go to their website, they acknowledge that because of the report that we ran yesterday, because of this programme, they have now issued new information for relatives and families who are concerned and feel that they are in this situation. Crucially, as you say, they acknowledge that people are frightened to raise concerns because they think it will happen to them. So they know that this is a problem. They go on to say, for the first time, that they will look at ways of collating information about the number of bans and evictions. They don't say what those ways are, but to some extent, perhaps a step forward.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Well, as we've said, lots and lots of you getting in touch with us yesterday. We're joined now by Debbie Bunn, whose mum was told to leave her care home in Essex earlier this year. Also Stephen Dorrell, the former Health Secretary and Chairman of the NHS Confederation. We're also joined by Mike Padgham, who owns a care home in Scarborough, and Paul Conroy from the local government ombudsman, who deals with complaints about care homes. Thank you all very much for joining us. We'll start with you, Debbie, because, I mean, this is a story that we've not heard much about until yesterday, but you've been in exactly the situation, haven't you? Your mum forced out of her care home. Tell us what happened.
I returned a feedback survey and I listed some concerns on there. The care home said, sent me an email, said, we have elevated this to a complaint. We take your concerns really seriously. We'd like you and your sister to come in for a meeting. It was in December last year. We were both busy. I see my mum at weekends, my sister during the week, so to get a time when we could do it together. It was on the 18th of December, just a week before Christmas. When we arrived, I asked for an agenda of the meeting, and we were told it was the concerns that I'd raised on the feedback survey by email.
Which they'd invited you to
Yes.
do because it was a feedback.
My sister said, what have you said? And I didn't take a copy of it, I couldn't remember. She got a copy and she was like, oh gosh, you know, I'm so relieved. It's just standard stuff, you know, broken equipment, lack of staff, nothing terrible. So when we got there, and there was another senior carer there who worked at the weekends, and she said that she was on tenterhooks when I was there. We were very involved with our mum's care. She'd lived there for 6.5 years. And we wanted to know everything, you know, that was happening and be involved in every decision. If she had a bruise, I wanted to know if it had been recorded. You know, just, I think, basic things that every relative would want. Anyway, this meeting I suppose it lasted about half an hour, and the owners were there, management, this senior carer who we hadn't been advised would be there. So we were totally taken aback. And they said, we don't think you're happy here. And I said, I haven't said that. Where does it say this in our feedback survey? And they said, no. They looked at each other and said, shall we do it? Yeah, let's do it. We're going to give you 28 days notice to quit, as is our right. We are exercising our right to evict. And they'd arranged this meeting an hour before our continuing care assessment. So our continuing care officer came in. We hadn't actually met him before, but he was completely gobsmacked. He'd never had an experience like that. He didn't know what to do.
What about you? I mean, this was personally affecting you. How did you react?
totally shocked. He conducted the assessment of my mum and said that Mary Lutz could still meet my mum's needs. And that day, an hour after this meeting where she gave us the notice to quit, she signed the form and said that the home were meeting my mum's care needs. And then they said afterwards...
So it boils down to the fact that
they said relations with me in particular had broken down, that carers were on tenterhooks when I was there, and that they wanted to evict mum. And at this stage, she was 88, she'd lived there 6.5 years, she couldn't walk, talk or feed herself. She'd had dementia for 12 years. I mean, it was just awful. We kept thinking, you know, this isn't going to happen. You know, someone is going to stop this happening. And in retrospect, I wish we'd just gone straight to the press, because we went the official route. We didn't want to make it any worse, but nobody helped us. The CQC didn't help us. We phoned them the next day. I mean, I hope that the changes that they're making now are because of our case, because I complained and complained. They didn't do anything. They said it wasn't their responsibility. They sent an investigator in on the 12th of April, the day my mum died. And as far as I'm aware, when the CQC do an unannounced inspection, they actually give the care home 4 weeks' notice that they're going to go in. And I was there at weekends, and the home was a very different place at weekends because there was no management, there was no admin staff, there were no handymen, there were no work experience students or activities people that were there during the week. So at weekends they literally had 4 carers to look after 28 people with increasing needs. But the CQC didn't investigate at the weekend. They went in on a Tuesday.
We've just been looking at the picture of your mum, and sadly, obviously, you know, you've mentioned that she has died.
Yeah. She died 7 weeks later. I mean, moving her in February, she was sick anyway.
So she did move,
care plan.
but you think it was the move?
Of course, she was dying. She'd had dementia 12 years. She was basically palliative. She was dying. She just needed people who understood her, and the carers there did understand her. They could talk to her, make her laugh, you know. And then we had to try and relate all that information because we practiced contented dementia, which is this method of no change and repetition. So we always did the same things. We always said the same things. She always knew who I was, and I think that that's, you know, quite unusual with somebody with dementia.
Stephen Dorrell, what do you say when you hear something like that?
There's nothing much you can say apart from the fact that it's indefensible and it's a terrible story. To have somebody required to leave a home in those circumstances is inhumane. There's no principle you can elaborate there beyond just common humanity. So I'm not. There's nothing you can say except that it's indefensible. What we have to, I think, the way through this is that we have to go back to first principles. A care home. The service that care homes provide, and the vast majority of them provide to good and high standards, it's a home environment in which members of the residents' family should be welcome. First, a key principle. Except
they don't have the rights to stay if the care home decides that they want them to go.
But I mean, if we go through the principles, if you're living in your home, and a care home is the individual resident's home, then of course members of your own family should be welcome. First key principle. Second key principle is that when you're running a care home, like when you're running any organisation, a complaint or a concern that is raised should be an opportunity to look at yourself in the mirror and say, how can we do this better? And so it should be something that an organisation embraces and sees as an opportunity. None of that appears to have been applied in this case.
Mike Padgham, because Mike, you run a care home. Have you ever had an experience with a family member complaining about the home in a way that the staff felt they couldn't necessarily deal with? I mean, how do complaints get dealt with in your homes?
Well, I've been running a care provision, care home, as you say, for over 25 years. Obviously, we've had complaints in the past. We're not perfect. But I think just picking up the point from Stephen Dorrell, it's something that we look at to make ourselves better. So complaints are a positive thing so that we can actually correct what's not right. But it was so distressing to hear that earlier case because all you want to do is to have happy residents, happy families, happy staff. Everybody then benefits, and it's tragic when it goes wrong, and we've got to do something about it in the future by rooting it out, of course.
And the point very clearly made to Debbie by the care home involved was that it was well within their rights to just force her mother out within 28 days, and they decided to go ahead with that. So it's within the rights of any care home. Could you imagine ever actually suggesting that be done to somebody or that a relative be banned from visiting?
No, it's never happened in all the time that I've run a provision. I think the critical issue is, of course, moving someone is the last last resort. You should do everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen. If you can't meet their care needs, of course, it might be that a move is necessary. You discuss that with the family and the professionals. But no, you do everything possible. And if there is a complaint that can't be resolved, then get a mediator in to bring the two sides together before you do anything. I can't comment on those cases you mentioned because I don't know the detail. But a complaint is positive, and keep people, and don't ban families if you possibly can, because people need to be together. Only if a resident's member of family or a resident themselves was violent or abusive to staff, you might have to have discussions, but you would never do that normally.
Paul Conroy, you're head of assessment at the Ombudsman. You're effectively the last stop where a complaint ends up. If the correct procedures are followed, they should be raised initially with the care home. The CQC is not giving out figures on how often cases like this are happening. Do you have any indication based on the cases that come to you?
I don't have individual figures about these types of complaints. I know we've dealt with quite a few. It's increasing.
Quite a few? I mean, could you put a figure?
Well, last year we received 3,000 complaints about adult social care across the piece.
Right.
And that's what we deal with. So that's the assessment of people's care needs, the provision of care, and that's across the 25,000 plus care providers in England.
But that covers all issues,
that will
does
cover
it,
all
rather than
issues,
specifically people
right.
being kicked out or residents being banned?
And it's nuanced and it's difficult in that funding for social care sometimes crosses the health divide. I understand Debbie's care was provided by the NHS,
yes.
So we're talking about local authority funded care and people who self-fund, who pay for care themselves. In terms of the outcomes of the complaints we investigate, generally we uphold about 57% of them, so things are going wrong. We're trying to support the sector in as much as we can to handle complaints or concerns, which is how they start. They shouldn't really grow into complaints, in an effective, responsive, transparent and open way. There's toolkits on our website. There's a standard complaints procedure on our website. And I very much welcome the CQC's announcement today.
So what does everybody think of the CQC's announcement today? Debbie, do you think it's going to make a difference?
I haven't only heard what you've said, but I have to say they just stood on the sidelines for us. They didn't stand up, they didn't help us at all. They said, you're in a private care home and that's the law. Apparently the law is different if you're in a private care home as opposed to a NHS care home. There's a definite gap in the law, and I think that's really what needs to be addressed, and that's why Alex Rook of Irwin Mitchell has taken on our case. We hope that, my mum will be one of the last people that happens to, and that she won't have died in vain. The other thing is the eviction process, escalating it from that stage. It was like, in retrospect, I think they knew that they were going to do that, and we were the ones that were completely shocked and flapping around, the week before Christmas with everyone going on holiday and really not knowing what to do. There should be, an official, as if you were in a rented flat. You wouldn't do that to an 88-year-old person or a 16-year-old person in a rented flat.
As Debbie's saying, Paul, the processes take time, and meanwhile, lives are being
Absolutely, we have dealt with very similar cases.
How long, if a case ends up coming to you, how long would that person, would the people involved in that case have effectively been protesting about what's going on by the time they even get to you? And how long does it then take to resolve once it gets to you?
It depends. What I would say to people is, usually would say to a care home, look, if you have a concern, pick it up and deal with it. You're best placed to resolve it. So, for example, Paul or Debbie having concerns about their relatives' care, they're legitimate questions. If your mother's there with bruising, that's a legitimate concern you have. And I'd expect a care provider to respond to it. If you're not getting a response, I would say contact the local government ombudsman and we'll pick it up.
Quick final thought from you, Stephen Dorrell. Should care homes just not be allowed to evict people effectively on this basis?
Well, they certainly shouldn't be evicting them on the basis that happened to Debbie's mum. I think that's blindingly obvious on the story
that
you tell.
As in not allowed to in their contractual terms?
What I think, there has to be a contract there needs to be a contract, and we can certainly, maybe we should look at the terms of those contracts. But I think we shouldn't think this is just about legal rights. This is about high standards of professional practice.
And human rights.
And Well, it's
My
it's-
mum's
it's a-
basic human rights were not upheld.
Exactly.
I mean, you know,
Yeah.
that's so wrong.
Quality is not just about defining legal minimum rights. This is about defining what we would all of us want for ourselves and for our family in terms of a caring experience. And that goes well beyond legal rights.
Thank you all so much for joining us
Thank
and
you.
talking very openly about this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And do keep your thoughts coming in on that. Thank you so much. As I say, we have had an enormous response from you to it, and we will keep on talking about it.